video is day 2 after your petals have dried in dealing with your bleeds, your value bleeds and blends. So on day 2, you want to go in and touch them up a little bit, maybe add some texture details to make them look more realistic. Or even if, let's just say, your bleeding didn't turn out exactly the way you wanted it, how to go in and fix it and add more deep, dark values to it without ruining it and making it look splotchy and kind of overpainted. So that's what I want to teach you in this video. That first portion of the video was just a refresher on how to drop in your water, get your paper prepared for the pigment, and then kind of drop in your color and just let it bleed. Tilt your paper and kind of let the water work its magic, and then go in and add your dark values and blot them in instead of paint them in. Remember, we discussed that last time. So blotting them in instead of painting them in is huge when you're trying to do these value blends and bleeds. So now, my water was really red and dirty. So I went and cleaned it and got some fresh water. So I would recommend doing that because you don't want, you're gonna go over, I'm gonna pretend that I don't like this area right here, and I'm gonna go over it, and I don't want to go over it with dirty water. I really don't mind it, to tell you the truth, but this, I just want to show you in this video what to do if you really don't like this area and you've already got the pigment on there and it's already dry on day 2. So this would be the opportunity to change it. So I'm going to take fresh water on my brush, and what I'm going to do is quickly add water to this, but I'm barely touching the paper, because remember, watercolor is not permanent. It's not like acrylic, so it will move and flow if you push down too hard. So I've wet the whole entire area first. You can see that some of the pigment is starting to pull off the paper and it's starting to flow a little bit, okay? The whole entire area is coated pretty decently. So what I can do now is figure out what color, what I want to do, and maybe I want to add just a little bit more of that red with some browns in there to make it really deep dark. So maybe this edge right here, I can show you, maybe this edge, I just want to drop some more of that pigment in and just let it flow. Now, now let me explain what I did. The reason why I didn't just start dropping the pigment in here right away without wetting the background is because if I didn't wet the background, then I would not get any more of these flows that are really pretty when you're doing this sort of technique. And that is the flow that I'm looking for. If I dropped it in without doing that, then I would get a really sharp line right here instead of a blended flow line, if that makes sense. And what I don't want is a sharp, solid line that automatically stops where the water stops. Unless that's what I'm doing with the painting. Maybe I've got some sort of effect where I want that. Like maybe I'm doing rocks and the rocks need to have that sharp edge on them, then maybe I can do that. But for this particular technique, I'm not doing that. I'm just making it kind of flow and blend instead and make it look like more of a value blend. So that's how you would do that. Just remember to wet the paper first, and then that way your fresh color doesn't have that stopping point. And that's the last thing you want to happen. So I'm gonna show you, I'll show you on this one right here. This one's dry. I'll show you what happens if you want, if I do it incorrectly, okay? So I'm mixing a color right here. So this is what not to do. This is what not to do. This is dry, so if I don't wet it, here's what happens. I go in and I try to drop my color, but my color has nowhere to flow. Do you see what I mean? My color is not flowing because the water is not pulling it down where it needs to be. And so if I realized that I wanted it darker on day 2, I can go ahead and do this if I want, but the pigment is only gonna stay where I paint it. It's only gonna stay where I paint it. And so can you see the difference in this area where the pigment just stops against the dry paper, as opposed to this area right here, where the paper was wet and I'm still able to achieve those blended areas like I was able to achieve on day 1. You can go in now with a really thin brush like this, really thin brush, and you can add some details in here to kind of pull out, you know, the look of the petal that you're trying to achieve. Just a few little wispy line details, kind of what I did on some of these here, but you can go in and do that as your final, you know, the very final details of that petal when you're finished. I hope those tricks and techniques help a little bit and make your petals a little bit better than they were. And then maybe just do a little bit of practicing, and then when you're finished practicing, you can come up with your own composition and try it and see what happens.